Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. You are tuned into Use's Speak Up series. Tonight is entitled Black Professionals in the White American Workforce. I am Kelly Kirkley. I am the executive director and co-founder of Use Underground Skills Exchange. We are a 501c3 nonprofit artist collective that provides the space for artists to collaborate, exchange skills, and develop new projects outside the confines of industry and society standards. We work to uplift the voices of underrepresented artists so they can in turn empower their respective communities. So we know that racism exists within every system in America. There are systems within the system. So tonight we wanted to expand beyond our artist community and specifically highlight melanated voices within one of those systems, the American workforce. And we wanted to invite professionals from various fields because we know that there is more than just one Black experience. And there's value in cultivating conversations between artists of color and members of other professions because it reinforces the fact that professions within the arts are indeed valid and legitimate. So throughout the night, we will also be running our Speak Up campaign and we'll be accepting donations via the link we have on the screen. Half of the proceeds will be donated to BEAM, the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. They are a training, movement building, and grant making organization dedicated to the healing, wellness, and liberation of Black and marginalized communities. So not only will your tax deductible donation aid BEAM in their mission, but it will also support us as we do our best to provide commission-based opportunities for artists during COVID. There will be a Q&A portion later on, so please, as the panel is going on, feel free to write your questions in the comment section, and we'll be collecting them throughout. They'll get to me, and we'll be able to present them to the panel later on. What we don't promise is to have any answers tonight to solving racism or systemic oppression, but what these four individuals do have tonight is the space to share their ideas and their experiences. Hopefully we'll have some wisdom for Black folks tuning in tonight, and hopefully we'll be heard by an audience who is truly listening. So I'd love to introduce you to our beautiful and talented panelists. First up, we have an actor-musician whose previous credits include New York Theater Workshop, CBS's Blue Bloods. He will be making his Broadway debut in the upcoming Sing Street. We have Jakeem Hart.
Hey.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Next up, we have a postdoctoral research fellow at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, focused in biomedical and biomechanical research, Dr. Erica Bell. Hey,
Hello.
Erica. Good to see you.
You too.
Next up, we have our multimedia editor for Fast Company magazine, the host of the podcast Creative Conversation, formerly part of the production team of Good Morning America, Emmy Award winner Casey Ifeanyi.
Hey, you nailed my last name. Good job.
Oh, yes, thank you. I practiced really, I was very, very nervous. And finally, she has previously worked in various roles in higher education, including sociology instruction, housing, and admissions. Currently the director of multicultural life at Muhlenberg College, Allentown, Pennsylvania. We have Robin Riley Casey. Robin! Hey! All right, so we're all here. Y'all look beautiful. Y'all look professional. Thank you so much for being here. Very professional. Keep it professional. So I would love to we're just going to jump right in. I want to start with you, Erica. The first question's going to you. So it seems that you are a Black woman, a doctor in the sciences, and it seems that there is an absence of Black women from STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mechanics. Mathematics. And the lack of visible role models has been directly correlated to women of color not wanting to follow that career path. So what was your journey? How did you land in the career path you're in right now?
So mine was a little weird because it wasn't necessarily something that I set out to do. I was actually kind of discovered in a way, you could say. So I started out, I don't want to start too far back because I could go all the way back, but I'll start with undergrad. I originally was at Seton Hall University, and then I was on the track team there. And through some events, our track team ended up getting cut during my sophomore year. But I really had a desire to continue my education, and I also still wanted to run. So I ended up transferring to East Carolina University. And that is where I ended up getting both my bachelor's and my PhD. I always knew I had a love for science, but I didn't quite know what to do with it. I always thought I was going to go into physical therapy. But I ended up taking an intro to biomechanics course my junior year there. And the professor who ended up becoming my PhD advisor really just took notice of my work ethic, the fact that I was a leader whenever we had group projects or lab projects. And he really liked just my work and how organized I was, and kind of just asked me like, hey, have you ever thought about doing research as a career? I was like, you can do you can have a career in that? I didn't know that was a thing. And so he invited me to do an independent research study with him. I ended up writing like an undergrad grant that I got. I funded my own project, and he basically just was grooming me for graduate school without me even knowing. And so his support and kind of pulling me out by noticing the talents that I had really set me off on the trajectory that I'm at now. So having gone through, finished that up, I got an internship doing research, and then I was able to go, not for my master's, but I went straight through to my PhD. And it was just it's not your typical route that you go, but I had the support from him from the start that really helped advance me in my career. So
cool. And Casey, I'll throw that same question at you. How'd you get into media?
You're gonna make me follow that. She's a whole doctor. Well, yeah. I mean, I like Erica mentioned, I can go like way back, but I'll try to keep it, succinct. But growing up, I always had like a right brain, left brain. I know that's kind of debunked, but I had a love for sciences and I had a love for art. And at the end of the day, I just had to go with, I had to go with my heart, which meant going the arts route. And so for me, I always had a love of writing. And, so I, changed majors in college, went into journalism. And I have to say that, I'm actually grateful that I did my undergrad at a place where journalism was not, it was offered, but it wasn't really supported. We didn't really have the resources or the kind of qualified teachers. And, I've always been a self-starter. And I think being in that environment just made it 10 times stronger. And so I knew that I didn't want to stay in the local market. So I had my sights set on New York. So I graduated, moved to New York with no plan other than, I will make it. I had no plan B. And so through whatever divine providence, I wound up getting a job in Fortune's Small Business Magazine within like 2 months of me moving, which is kind of unheard of. And I really was like, I don't care what I write about. I just want to write because I'm interested in everything. So I was like, business. Okay, cool. Got it. I can do that. And so it took like 2 marketing classes in college. I think I got this. And I've just kept bouncing from, went to custom publishing, went into like, video content. And then I decided to go to grad school because I felt like I didn't get the kind of journalism education that I felt like I needed. I kind of just wanted that, that real stamp of approval. I had a college diploma, but I was like, the paper's a little cheap on this one. I need like a heavier stock. So I applied to Columbia, no plan B, as that was like the only grad school I applied to. And I got in, and right after day after graduation, I started my job at Good Morning America. I was very fortunate to have a few job offers, but I never worked in TV. And so I was like, let me just take this and see what it's like. And and so I worked in TV for a year, won an Emmy. Where is she? There she is.
Yes, I knew you.
that's where she usually stays. I'm not just trying to flex, like just for
Okay.
that's where she's gathering dust on my shelf. Yeah, and it just kind of worked out again really nicely because after about a year of working in TV, I was ready to kind of transition out because it was, just a little, I kind of missed writing. I missed really just sitting down and talking to sources and, really digging into a good story. And so I was at the gym on the treadmill and I got an email from my former editor at Fast Company magazine who I'd freelanced with before. And he was like, hey, we would really love to have you back. Tell me what you want to do here. And I've been with them full time now it was 6 years in July. So sounds just 6 years at a media company is like I got where's some wood because it is not not that
Unstable,
common.
yeah.
It's so unstable. Wow. So for me to be at a place for that long and to even manage to do as much as I've done and kind of advance my career during COVID is kind of unheard of when most places are shutting down. So I'm eternally grateful that it all just kind of worked out. And yeah, it just feels like this is what I was meant to do because all the signposts were there along the way that, this is the right path. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Cool. So now I'm going to jump to Robin and I'm going to switch it up a little bit, Rob. You'll still get a chance to give us your exposition and all that too. But I want to ask you, Black folks growing up, a lot of us have been taught that we have to work twice as hard to get half of what they have. Mm-hmm. Twice as hard to get half of what they have. Were you taught that growing up? What does that mean to you?
Are you looking to me because my hair is gray? Is that why you're asking me that question?
No, I was afraid you'd ask. No, that's not the
reason. Too. It's okay.
Well, lucky for me, no, I wasn't taught that. My mother was a single parent. My father died when I was 4, so she had to raise me and my siblings alone. But luckily, I had a real strong extended family. But she always had this sort of perspective that, of course, we're as good as everybody else. And so she expected that of us. She never expected anything less. And I think I heard it from other people, but I didn't hear it from my family. And that was sort of daunting when I heard other people have that sort of mentality that we had to work harder just to be seen as, close to majority folk. But my mother always thought that we were, if not as well prepared as white people, we were better. She had a sense that we were better because of our history, because of having to sort of persevere through so much. And I think maybe because she had to persevere through so much as a single mother. And she was extremely brilliant. And my grandmother, the same way. She was, high school educated, didn't go on to college, but she was the one in the family who understood money like nobody's business. She's the one who had 3 houses and, gifted them to her daughter and then to her grandchildren and understood how money worked. And a grandfather who came from, the South, Kentucky, and got out and made sure that his children had opportunities, although he didn't have a high school education. So I think because of their sort of forward thinking, always moving ahead and always persevering, they never saw themselves as having to do more. They already knew they were more. So that was not a part of our growing up experience, but I had heard that from others, from teachers along the way. You have to do, you have to work twice as hard to do. And I'm like, shoot, I can only do what I can do. I'm already good enough. So I've had that kind of experience because of my family upbringing. Yeah.
Cool. Great. So yeah, Jakeem, with that, I'm going to bounce this over to you because Robin's at Muhlenberg. You're an alum of Muhlenberg. I'm an alum. Laura's an alum. Yes. We know that lifestyle and, what Robin leads, the whole multicultural community. What was your experience in terms of maybe feeling like you have to work harder to get ahead of other people, or you have to do certain things to stand out or to not stand out in some instances as a Black student at Muhlenberg, one of 10?
Yeah. one of like 10. It's my understanding that it's gotten a bit better population-wise since we've left. Like they've upped their. No,
I was gonna say that's my understanding too, but I was looking at Robin's reaction.
Yeah. No. Okay. Good. Please set the record straight. What did I have to do? Well, I'm not gonna like say that I had a difficult time in terms of being at the theater department. Like I was very fortunate to perform a whole lot, and I'm grateful for those experiences. But in terms of like indignities that I've suffered while being on that campus because of the color of my skin, like like I was in a fraternity, and I don't know why I did it. I had friends that were in it, so and they kind of.
I remember you regretting it.
Yeah. I did it, and I was pretty much their only diversity that they had in my pledge class, and when you're around like a bunch of white men in their 20s or something, there's alcohol involved, like they'll really like the walls start to break down and you start to see people for who they are, and while they may be professing on social media, or in some cases but professing on social media like they're about certain causes or whatnot, like when they're at the party and when they're drunk, they'll show you exactly what they're about. So that's happened a couple times. I don't want to get into specifics, but use your imagination. But in terms of like my experience with the theater department, I wish there were more people like me there while I was there. I wish there were more professors that looked like me in the theater department. They claim it was, they're just not there, or like, their recruitment process, it didn't
Just
bear,
not there.
just not there. I'm like, no, of course they're there. Like, just put some money at it and you can find the people that you claim to want to be looking for. I don't know if that answered your question, but like, that's just like experience in a nutshell.
A little bit.
Please, yeah.
And Jakeem they were both stars at Muhlenberg, and they're gifted. There's no doubt about that. But I think for students who may not have that kind of talent, for lack of better words, more than that, it's talent, and it's also kind of like what you said, Casey, and also I think Erica, something about puts you in the right place and something that's driving you forward. Sometimes I think students of color attended Muhlenberg because that was the financial aid package was just so that made it, that's the place that they attended. And so they do struggle trying to prove that they belong there, because some people believe the only reason why you are here is because we gave you that leg up. Otherwise, you wouldn't have never made it in an institution like a Muhlenberg College. And so they struggle with that sort of stereotype that, you're not qualified to be here. And it's just a diversity kind of, not hire, but admittance. And many students of color experience that, and we hear that over and over and over again. But both Kelly and Jakeem, I think, and then one of your partners, Eric, they were stars, but they were one of one, in the theater department at one time, that can really showcase how brilliant we are and how much they enrich the community. But it is a lonely place to be, and I'm sure they can speak more to that, as we move forward.
Yeah, and because Jakeem, you mentioned they're just not there, right? Black professors are just not there. There's no one to look up to. Listening, Erica, to your journey, I heard you mention strongly about this one role model. And then KC, listening to you, I heard it more of you creating your own opportunities. So I want to jump back to Erica. Who was your role model? Like, what demographic were your role models?
So when I really think back, and Kelly, you and I had talked about this, but when I really started to take a real liking or realize that I'm really good at science and math and I really like them a lot, that was probably when I was in middle school. And I used to aid in classrooms for the math and science teacher, which was, for me, was Mr. Gilbride and Mr. Coyle, both of whom were white males. And I'm still to this day in touch with the both of them. Yet again, because it was kind of just that thing of they saw something in me and wanted to see, you know, as I continued to progress through high school and beyond, you know, if I was able to do anything with that. And then as I get into like high school, same thing with my science and math teachers, Mr. Ottman and Mr. Shuttler. But again, these are white males. And then I go on and I get into undergraduate, and my PhD advisor is also a white male. And then I go from there, and I finally switched to a female, but she's still white. So going through all of these different realms, all of the support, I guess, that I've really had to help kind of progress me through all these stages predominantly have been white males. And I'm not saying that's, you know, it's not a bad thing, because thankfully they really were in my corner to help me. But at the same time, because I'm not a white male, there are some things that I probably needed support on that I could not get from them. And it's not necessarily, even if we had the best relationship ever, is not something I would feel comfortable talking with them about. So for me, I did the best with what I could, and I really appreciated that they were there for me and supported me through all of those different things. But I knew once I got toward the end of my doctoral career, when I was able to look back and see this pattern, I was like, something is kind of wrong with this. The fact that I cannot point out a single African-American person along my journey to get here. And it kind of fueled me now to want to be that person for somebody else moving forward in my career. I want to be able to be that person that I didn't get to see when I was coming up.
Yeah. Casey, I remember we talked about you being a role model and you being a mentor to people who you kind of want to pave the path for people coming up in your field. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's because, like I mentioned, you know, I think I never really got that level of support. Because I say early in my career, and I really count college as early in my career, because that's, you know, you're getting, you know, you're working on the paper, you're getting a lot of practical experience and all that type of stuff. And so for me, it was really frustrating because, like, I really hit the ground running and I wanted to, like, you know, just throw myself into it. And I remember going to one of my professors and being like, look, I know I'm only a sophomore, but I really want to get like an internship. And, you know, she was refused to help. She was like, you know, like, you don't have any clips, you don't have anything. So I was just like, right then and there, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to figure this out on my own. And so I did, you know, I got an internship at some random marketing thing that, you know, it was something to put on my resume. It's not, I mean, I'm not in marketing now, but, you know, I was like, I need to do this. I need to start stacking things up. And, you know, it was like that. And, you know, it was really frustrating because, you kind of, to Erica's point, like, there was one African-American on my whole staff, and I couldn't even really look to him for his support. Like, perfectly nice man, but didn't know what he was doing, because I remember I actually had to teach one of his classes. It was layout and design. We had to like learn how to use like layout, like a paper or a magazine. And I wound up teaching myself because I was the editor in chief of the paper at the time. So I just taught myself, and people would come to me with questions about like, oh, like, how do I do this? And people just look to me instead of him. So it's like, I was like, oh, you're a nice guy, but I don't know if I can respect you, because like, what is this? Like, you're not teaching anything. But I think now I'm in the position where I've just sort of been on this really straightforward, like, you know, had my blinders on, just wanted to just, you know, reach a point where I can start. I'm at the point in my career now where I have been, you know, anytime there's an intern or anyone that comes to me with a question or anything, I'm so willing to help, because I had to clear that path for myself. And if I can usher someone in toward the path that I cleared, there's so many things. I mean, I'm still pretty young in my career, but that's one thing right now that I'm like, I feel so fulfilled when I do that. You know, I feel like it's, you know, working, like I said, whether it's with the intern, whether it's, you know, even just talking to, some of my older friends are like, oh, my daughter or this person wants to, enter into journalism. Like, can you talk to them? I'm like, yes, absolutely. Because even just to give that person that nudge of support and saying like, look, if I can do it, like it's because I didn't come, I made it this far without any insanely prestigious undergrad on my resume. I mean, Louisiana Tech University, look it up because I guarantee you don't know where it's at. It's like no one knows where it's from. So for me to go from there to like winning an Emmy, it's like I want people to see that it is possible, and I want to help people on that journey as much as possible. So yeah, that for me, that's where I feel really fulfilled in my career at this point, is anytime I can just kind of reach back and say like, hey, I already cleared a lot of this out of the way, like however I can help, like let me help, because it's hard. And I think, I don't now, while going through it, I didn't really process it as being hard. I was just like, oh, you're not going to help me? Bet, got it. And I'll just like keep going forward. But now, now at this point in my career, I'm like, oh wow, I did a lot. So it's
well, role models are super important. And Jakeem, I know you can relate to this, just being in theater and how
absolutely
how white dominated it is. I had never worked with a Black director until this year. And then I looked back at it and I was just like, oh my God, literally I've never had a Black, and I thought back to like every single thing I've done. And I'm just like, I've never been led by a Black person in the field that I'm in. And then, just talking about when you see a Black person or somebody who looks like you in this white space, it's a game changer. Mm-hmm. So transitioning into this idea of white spaces, right? Mm-hmm. I know that we all know, but from experience, but I like to give a sociological definition for the people at home, just in case, just to kind of set it up. But white spaces, settings previously only occupied by whites, where people of color enter with mixed reception, such as schools, places of work, and neighborhoods. We've historically felt these places to be off limits. White people typically avoid Black spaces, but Black people are required to navigate the white space as a condition of their existence. So for us to have to navigate the white space, we are required to adapt these traits or things merits that will reward us and help us stand out and get ahead in white spaces. So that leads me to this idea of professionalism, right? And I want to jump to Robin and just ask you how in a community where you're seeing people being raised up and being trained to believe these and follow these ideals of professionalism. What are you seeing? What are the merits of professionalism that Muhlenberg is instilling?
Well, I'm lucky that because multicultural life is inherently and not about white people or not about majority folk. It's inherently about marginalized communities across race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, that we are empowered to be more ourselves. However, for students, they still have to navigate white spaces outside of that, the classrooms, the hallways, the theater departments, the dance studios, art, all those other spaces that have traditionally, including the canon, whatever it may be, whether it's the psychological canon, the sociological canon, even the sciences that historically have preyed upon Black and brown bodies for their own research and not necessarily for the benefit of Black and brown people. So we know that history. We don't have to go back through that. Mm-hmm. I find it problematic. I had hoped that higher education would be a place where students of color, particularly Black and brown students, would find a space to be as free as possible to sort of figure out how they wanted to be in this world. And in fact, I find it to be more constraining than I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. And given my role, which is supposed to advocate on behalf of marginalized communities, oftentimes I feel myself tugged between having to communicate with white people on their terms in order for marginalized people, Black and brown, to get what they need. And that
Can you
sucks.
speak more on that? Yeah, can you speak more on that? What you mean specifically?
I'm not one to compromise. I'm not one to bend my knee or bow my head. And I often find that colleges and universities and institutions in general feel like they're doing some sort of service by providing resources for marginalized community members, when in fact, those marginalized community members are providing a service to majority spaces. And they only seem to know that when there's a crisis. You know, George Floyd, and then everybody's like, "What can I do? What can I do?" Well, shit, you can. Sorry, that all along. It's not because George Floyd or our Asian community, who's right now is being inundated with the Kung Fu virus and the ugliness that is coming out, across the nation, and from the highest offices in the land. Our president just doesn't seem to understand how bias operates then when he speaks about the coronavirus, and how our Asian community members are experiencing that. That's when it seems to be meaningful. That's when there's a crisis. But up until that point, it's kind of piecemeal. We give you a little bit of this, we give you a little bit of that. And yet the students, I feel like every year since I've been at Muhlenberg, there's an action, there's a student action, there's a protest, there's a rally saying our needs are not being met, and yet you're asking for more and more of us, more talent. Like, Jakeem and Kelly, for instance. I mean, they are the actors that have always called upon to sort of express something about something other than white, spaces. And it's through their bodies. It's through their voices, it's through their presence, that kind of a thing. So I feel torn by it, because I think that in some ways, and I think students have articulated this better than I can, it feels being used, and that they're expendable. They're 4 years, get them through, use them as for what they can be used for. And yet many of them have walked away sometimes extremely miserable. And 4 years of your college years should not be miserable. If it's 4 years of your life being miserable, it's not worth it. I don't think. I think 4 years of your youth, 17 to 21 to 22, whatever it is, should be the most fun you can possibly have, if you can have it. And yes, you have to learn. You should be learning. That should be fun too. But if it's misery based on the fact of how you see yourself and how you identify, and your people and your community, your culture, and all that kind of stuff, then it's just not. I don't think it's a space for people. Some people are able to manage it and walk through, and some people just really they die inside a little bit at a time. And I don't think it's good.
Robin, I remember you always saying, remember to have fun.
Yeah.
Because it's just, especially because me being so involved in the theater, and then also co-president of the Black Students Association, and all the other things I was doing, and classes too. It's like, how do I still want to be seen as a scholar, and I still want to be seen as somebody who's good at my craft in the theater department. But at the same time, I need to be leading this group that people aren't even paying attention to, and that might require doing some things that might not be seen as so scholarly, right? Or might not, how do I want to be seen as a scholar, but at the same time, how do I not be penalized for being an activist on campus? And it was hard trying to find that balance. Jakeem, a lot of what Robin's saying is reminding me of the American theater. So I would love for how would you define professionalism within the context of your field?
Sure. So basically, it comes down to, I guess, what you and I talked when we had our pre-interview or phone call. It was code switching, essentially, or your ability to assimilate as closely to whiteness while still being Black. How that manifests is, even in the audition setting, like you're expected to have this sort of demeanor that is somehow other than how you would talk to your friends or your family. I sort of am doing it right now because this is how I talk whenever I'm nervous and in front of people. I have to tighten up and seem non-threatening. I don't know. It's a nervous habit. So that's just what happens. But how it also manifests.
The mustache too, Jakeem.
Huh? What did you say?
The mustache
Yeah, the
makes it
mustache.
so non-threatening to me.
Well, hey, you know, that's a matter of opinion, I guess. But
You've grown up so much.
But what I was saying is how it also manifests is like, you know, I'll give an example. So for like first couple months when I got my new agents, you know, they tell you audition for everything, basically, like, because it's a new opportunity, new people that are, you know, opening doors for you. So just go out for everything. I went out for one role and I looked at the sides, prepared it, and it was, what was it? It was something produced by 50 Cent. I think it was on Stars Network. I don't remember.
Power.
what the show was. Yes, the spinoff.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they need you to be drug dealer number 1, number 2. all
Pretty
that?
much. So I prepared how I thought that would have gone, and everyone behind the table white. And then they say to me, like, after I was finished with my audition, like, yeah, that came from like we felt that came from a very real place. Then they were like, can you like explore that more? Can you just like dig a bit deeper into that? And I'm like, they're asking me to be blacker. Basically, that's what they were saying, like, for me to do without like so many words. But like, here's the thing though, they're asking that of me, the actor coming into the room. But if they had anybody behind their table who was black and acting the way that they were asking me to act, they would have been fired. You know, or that behavior wouldn't have been tolerated. So I'm like, there's this disconnect where, you know, you're reducing characters to stereotypes and tropes and then like rewarding that and thinking that comes from a real place, when in fact I'm trying to act my face off. I'm not like this in real life, obviously. So I'm like, there's this disconnect between like certain things being acceptable in certain circumstances. So
Yeah.
you know.
And do you feel a lot that, I know you get the feeling that they think that we should feel grateful just that we're here
To be in the room, absolutely.
to be in the room,
Yeah.
right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, it's like the whole problem with, you know, claiming that there's opportunity. There's a difference between opportunity and true access. So, and how that operates in the theater is like, you know, everybody wants to be an actor. There's you know, hundreds of thousands of people applying for a very finite amount of jobs. So literally they can afford to act like gatekeepers, because that's basically what it is. So any sort of problem that you have, that gets stuffed down deep inside, because God forbid that should come out and jeopardize your position when they've been so generous to show you into this nice space that was previously closed to you. So you don't get a lot of opportunity really to just like be 100% honest all the time. You end up keeping a lot of stuff to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you brought up a good point earlier too. We can get Erica and Casey back in is code switching, right?
Yeah.
And then figuring out how to kind of easily navigate, you know, so they say some people can slip in easily. They can slip in between like American Standard English and African American Vernacular English. Have either of you felt? I'll start with Erica first. Have you ever caught yourself doing that, or have you ever been conscious of, oh, I need to make sure I'm conducting myself a certain way right now? You know, that certain way might be, you know, that might be based on, you know, principles of white professionalism. But have you ever caught yourself having to perform while you're trying to get ahead in your industry? That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, honestly, being in the science realm, that's kind of just like it's a given. Like there's, it's kind of automatic. I think a lot of times I'm just so conditioned to it that I don't even notice. Like it's not like a conscious thing that I have to think about to do. I just know that that's something already, given the field that I'm in, that I have to do. Because all the scientific terminology and the way that I would present things, I cannot talk like that in real life, and you know, that go over very smoothly. So it's weird because I feel like I have to do quite a few switches. So I have the scientific professional switch that I do, and then there's just the professional without the scientific part, because you still have to be able to communicate with your lay audience who are not so familiar with science terminology. And then you can probably take a step down from there into some of the informals, but when you're talking maybe with your lab mates, but there's still just a tinge of that professionalism in there where you can be a little informal but not quite. And then there's a whole separate tier of like, now I can just totally talk however I want to talk because I'm with my people. So there's quite a few switches actually that I have noticed that I've had to go through. So it really, really depends on what setting I'm in. If I'm at a conference talking, or if I'm talking with my lab mates, or if I'm trying to communicate something, like if I do a presentation for like a school or something, there's a whole bunch of switching inherently that I have to do. And sometimes it's just, as soon as I know the environment or the audience, then it automatically happens, and it's not really something I have to think about.
Right. Yeah, it's not just Jakeem who's a performer up here, it's everybody.
On stage and off.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
man.
Casey, do you think Black people are bilingual or have to be bilingual to get ahead?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I mean, I think to varying degrees. I think it's the idea of code switching I find really interesting because for me personally, I mean, like my parents come from Nigeria. I was born in the States. I have growing up there was no shortness of like Black representation. My mom's like a literature professor, so I grew up with just all these books of like just so there was so much Blackness in our home. But I find it interesting for me, like kindergarten through 5th grade, I went to a predominantly Black elementary school, and I had kids there telling me that I acted and spoke white, like a white person. And it was so odd for me because I was like, I'm not like BLAQUE. I'm not like Black. Like I was just being myself. And it was just so odd that it wasn't good enough for them, but it never made me feel any less Black because I was like, this is just who I am. It's like you have your quote unquote Black identity. I have my own. And so I think going through the professional world, I find it interesting because no one's said this outright, obviously, because they would just get clocked. But I feel like people kind of look at me as like the acceptable Black. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that's so gross, and I hate that. And because it's like, what does that even mean? And I think, there's a few moments in, whether grad school or, my professional world where it's like, am I just kind of being like pushed up? Like I'm thinking of like when I was in grad school and like we, had a new dean coming in and they needed like a student representative to be on the committee to select the dean of the journalism school at Columbia, which is like a big deal. And I was picked out of all the students, and I'm just like, why though? Like, I mean, thank you, I'll take it, but it's like, like, do you just need like a face, like a brown one? But so I feel like it's one of those things like where that's part of what I was saying earlier is like really just trying to create those pathways, because I know to some, to some degree, there are people who have privileges even within, the Black space. And, I think I really do try to sit with that, recognize it, and use it to the advantage of someone else that hasn't been in my position, So I think that, so that I think that question of like, are Black people, bilingual, I think is really fascinating because yes, to varying degrees, but, for me, it's like I've never been in that position of feeling like I was code switching or that I am or that because it's just, I guess for a lot of white people, I'm non-threatening, I guess, which is like, you don't know me then. But yeah, it's an interesting question for sure.
Yeah, and it's these past few months I've had 2 phone interviews for jobs, and I just thought this to myself the other day. I was fortunate that I got both of these jobs, but it's just like they probably have no idea who they're talking to on the other side of the phone, because I know I've been told I sound white very often, and I just know how to do that, and I know how to be aware of it, because when I'm trying to sound professional, it's like, no, I need to get this job. I'm in a certain lane,
Right.
and it's easy. You know what I mean? So yeah, Robin, talk to me. I want to jump more. I want to talk about like these kids at Muhlenberg, like these black kids in the multicultural department, all that. How are they handling? Are they able to code switch? Are they willing to? Do they care to? Or how? What is? Because me, I wanted to seem like a scholar, right? But I don't know what everybody else's experiences who were there. What are they feeling? Because I know you get bitter. By the time you're through with bitter, you're like, I don't care anymore. Just get me out of this school. Like, I've been there. Jakeem's been there. Like, I mean, on a certain level, I still have fun. It was still a really great experience, and I miss you very much. I miss you very much. But
I'm not going to ask you for donation anymore.
I have to go back.
You don't have to say nothing you don't want to say.
No, I mean, I'm from Ohio, but you guys are from what I call the East Coast. So New York, Philly, New Jersey folk, they don't play. And so we're lucky that way, that the Black kids in particular are highly radicalized. They don't take much. I mean, Kelly, when you were in PSA, I remember when that stupid Disney cartoon came out, and the Bumblebee or whatever it was had this sort of Uncle Tom voice, and Eric came in. Why did he have to talk like that? I'm like, I don't know, Eric, is this a Bumblebee or whatever it was? I can't even know what it was. It's the one when we had the first Black princess.
Oh, we're talking about Princess and the Frog. Okay.
Oh my God, Eric was highly upset. God, what the hell is going on?
Eric, too bad Eric can't be here to watch this tonight, because we were talking about him a lot. But anyway.
So everything is up, everything is contested, everything, which is exhausting though, I think, for students, because I think for the first time they can see everything in the light of day. And so, Gone with the Wind, and what's that one movie that everybody talks about now that's just, they can't, it's constantly being torn apart, but Dr. Seuss, everything. And so I think that our students, our Black students, are highly radicalized, and yet they don't have role models to sort of pace themselves. And so they tire very quickly. Some crisis will occur and they have to address it, because it's not about them. It's the students that are coming up behind them. It's their own lives at the institution, and they need to address it. And then they just, they're just exhausted and emotionally drained. And it can also impact their physical well-being, let alone their studies, right? Mm-hmm. And so I worry about our Black kids, because there's so few. There's still not that many than it was when you were students. And their studies should be their primary concern. But when you're at an institution that's primarily white, I think there's a feeling of responsibility to make sure that issues of injustice don't get lost in just sort of everyday kind of college life, that many Black kids in particular speak up and put themselves in harm's way. And I worry about them a lot. So I think that, I think it's across the nation. It's not just Muhlenberg, but we've seen it, athletes. I mean, I was so excited when Missouri athletes got really highly involved when Colin took the knee, and then they were like, you know what, you're making money off of us, people. Like those big Division I schools, they finally figured out you're making money off of us. So here are our demands. And so I think that's great. And yet I worry about the students. It shouldn't be their work. But when you don't have a lot of Black faculty or brown faculty, it's kind of like it is the students. It is multicultural life responsibility to sort of step up until we have, and then you can't always assume that Black and brown faculty just by virtue of being Black and brown, they also have their scholarship and their research. And, you know, and it's like, it's kind of the assumption, like, you know, that every Black and brown person is an activist. And I worry about that. I worry about that. We don't assume that about every queer person, you know, or every disabled person is a, you know, an activist for their particular community, but we assume that Black and brown folk is, and then our Black and brown faculty become exhausted. And so then, then they usually are one of two. So, I mean, as I'm excited about Erica and KC, and that, you know, like you said, blazing that path, I'm so excited for more role models, and Jakeem and Kelly. But you're still one of few. So you have to kind of pace yourselves too, because it can be exhausting, it can be draining, and you still have to have fun.
Yeah.
It's hard out here.
Yeah. So not every Black and brown person is an activist, and don't always look to the closest Black and brown person to ask the questions or to help you figure out what you should do. I remember, Casey, when we talked the first time, you said something about, you know, that, you know, there are Black writers who don't want to always have to write about being Black. They want to write about other things. You know what I mean? And then I guess Black people also just want to go to work and not have to fight these battles every day. And they just want to go home and watch Real Housewives. You know, they don't want to have to, like, that's just an example, but we have a few minutes left. So now I just want to go around and have everybody answer quickly. And this is really hard because this is not a quick answer, but just whatever you can kind of get out quickly in each of your industry. Well, actually, let's focus on Jakeem. Jakeem, how did after May 26th, you know, George Floyd's death, what was the reaction from the theater, from the higher ups, from the producers with money? How was it handled, in your opinion?
People did different things, some more than others. I know people in a cast of Hamilton, I think, they hired Black hairdressers, they hired HR people, they hired, they made more Black appointments within their higher, like, company management. I think all of upper management had to attend a 14-hour anti-racist training session or something like that. And some people or some companies stopped at an Instagram post. So the response is kind of, you know, it was not uniform by any stretch of the imagination. So everybody responded however they best saw fit to respond. So, yeah.
How about you, Erica? What is the higher ups in your field, in your lab? What was the kind of environment they cultivated throughout this whole situation?
So it was kind of interesting. I think at first I was hesitant to even say anything because for me, I just started my job in January, and I was only there for 2 months before COVID hit and we all got sent home to work from home. So I didn't really even get a chance to really establish any strong connections with anybody within my immediate lab space, let alone within the whole, you know, Mayo institution, which is huge. But thankfully, my advisor is already someone who is very vocal and active within our community in Rochester. And so she took the time out to ask me if I was okay during everything that was going on. And it literally almost made me cry. And it was in an email, but I had, you know, a lot of feelings and things like that. But like I said, like not having an African-American person within my lab space, I'm the only one now in that lab space. I wasn't really sure how to go about that because I didn't have really a good gauge on other people to know if it was okay to talk about that or not, or to what extent I could talk about it. And she just kind of came in and was like, hey, if you need to talk about stuff or vent about anything, like, we just want to make sure you're okay and that we're here to support you. So immediately within my lab group, I definitely had, at least they reached out and were very supportive. I think sometimes it takes a little longer for the higher ups to come and swoop in, and, you know, because they just got a lot of boxes and things they have to check. But I have seen that there is a strong initiative now that's coming out where they're really trying to put some things together to really target anti-racism within the medical community, specifically at Mayo, where they're encouraging staff and melanated voices to kind of speak up about their experiences and share, and trying to develop ways where we can better support our Black people within their institution. So overall, it's been a good response, but timing is kind of a thing.
Right. I've spoken to a lot of friends, and most of them white men, who have said that their higher ups or their CEOs of their companies just handled everything so poorly, with just like have a Zoom call, just be like completely unprepared and not really educated on what exactly they were addressing and what needed to happen and the direction that actions needed to be, and the direction of actions that needed to happen as well. So Casey, I want to direct this at you. What's the environment at your job like? How, is there? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I think media was interesting because obviously, with the protest and covering the protest, and then like a couple weeks after, the media landscape specifically was dealing with all these explosive stories about Bon Appetit and racism in the industry, and like Vogue, everything was kind of coming out of the closet. And I think overall, I have to say, like Erica, there's not that many Black people on staff, specifically editorial. I do think on edit, I am the only Black person. And there was outreach, from the CEO of our company and my specific editor in chief and my editor. Like they were all very like, if you need to take time, do it. I do remember. I'm very fortunate in that Fast Company unionized. I want to say we were officially recognized like late last year, early this year, and so we, in response to an all hands meeting we had that went. Do you ever just in a situation where you have like well-meaning whites, but they don't quite get it? Like it's like, I see that you mean well, but like, so we kind of had that situation pop up. And it was very clear that if we want to forge a path forward that is, if we want to practice what we preach, because at Fast Company we talk all about, productivity, better workplaces, all this type of stuff. And for the most part, it's great. But there is room for improvement at the top, specifically when it comes to more women, more people of color, like just every intersection you can imagine is very white, straight male, like, and it's so, I think the union really like launched quickly once it became apparent that having that sort of diversification at the top wasn't going to be handled by the right people. The union stepped in and were like, we got it. Like we will handle this like diversity committee. You guys can hang back. Like we got this. So, I think it's a situation where, generally you feel supported. You feel that, you can, take time for yourself. It's not going to be a taboo thing if you say like, I want to cover this or I want to do that or I want to take time off or whatever it might be. So yeah, I'm grateful for that, but I'm also grateful that where those gaps are, there's a system in place that we can fill it because, we're with the union. So we have more might behind these things. So yeah, it's a fortunate situation for us.
Now you said well-meaning white folks, right? And and I want to talk about, because Jakeem and I talk about this all the time with the idea of allyship, and whether we like that word or the term or what it stands for, or do we need to re-express it somehow? But how do we feel about it, and what does a good one look like? Yeah, Jakeem, go ahead.
Me, okay. The allyship, I think now, and you can argue like, this is nothing new, but it's become, basically a performative thing, for like virtue signaling. Like that's where a lot of people's allyship ends, as I said earlier. So I think maybe going forward, we shouldn't really be so concerned maybe with that term, and maybe replace it with something like accomplice, which, you know, connotes you assuming risk and also personal responsibility and putting yourself in harm's way, leveraging your own white supremacy against the system, because that's the only way that we're actually going to have true progress.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So,
Robin, what about you? What do you think of that?
I just can't get with the word accomplice. I get it. And I do think the allyship is outdated and it can be performative. I think that your alma mater has done a good job of actually being able to hear and take constructive to challenge the status quo. I think they've been very good at that. And
I've
actually,
seen the videos,
they've been able to accept that they've been wrong, and that they have not been actively dismantling, the system, which is the institution, and for the betterment of the community as a whole, which they talk about a lot, which is everybody at this institution. So I think for me, allyship is really when those majority folk, whoever they may be, can recognize their own complicity in maintaining a system of oppression, and then accepting that they're not the best people to actually dismantle it. The best people who can dismantle it are probably the underprivileged, are the marginalized community members, because they are the ones who are experiencing it in real time. They know what it feels like to be denigrated, without resources, and know what they need. So they have to step back and let the marginalized community members actually kind of guide the ship. And if they're able to do that, then they can come along for the ride. Otherwise, gotta get out of the way. That's kind of how I feel about it.
I agree. Yeah. I wasn't insinuating like white people take a front seat to white supremacy. It's more so like in letting Black people take the charge and take the lead, you are therefore leveraging your white supremacy against the system. So that's kind of the distinction that I wanted to make.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Erica, do you have any thoughts on that as well, on allyship?
I mean, I'm kind of with what Robin was saying, and I've had some of these discussions with people as well, or other people of color, some of my friends. It's, I think sometimes kind of hard to balance that a little bit, because, we have this, I forget what the exact term is, but basically like there's a tax on us to do the work, ourselves. But I agree definitely that we know better than anybody else what it is that we need. Because we're not in those positions of power to make things happen, we need those people of majority to let us take the reign, like lead, like she said, to let us steer the ship, and they can help guide it. So they can come in and help to put in place those resources and things, and they have the power to put us on that stage or platform that we need to actually make things happen. But they cannot be the ones to make the decisions for how these things are going to get fixed. Because if you knew how to fix it, you would have fixed it already. So, or if you knew what you needed to fix, you would have done that already. And it's not enough to just be aware that, oh, this might be an issue. That's not enough. So I agree that it is a thing of we do need Brown and Black people to be kind of the leaders of that, to say these are the different things that we need. And then it should be more of a thing of, for our white majority, it'd be like, okay, well, what can we do to help you make these things happen, and to help you guys get what you need.
Yeah. Well, great, guys. Thank you so much for, I just want to end this portion here of me kind of facilitating and asking the questions. And obviously, like we said before, we don't have answers. These aren't new conversations, right? But we're just getting them started, and we're just, talking amongst ourselves. So thank you, everybody out there, for listening and your questions. Speaking of those questions, we kind of want to dive into, I think we might have time for 2 or 3 of them. I think Laura, you're able to pop them up on the screen there for us, right? If not, you got them here. I can just read them over here. Oh, there we go. She's got it. Laura has been running everything on our back end for us, so thank you very much. So who are the Black community members you look to right now, whether that be within your field or not? And anybody who wants to answer can take that.
I've been seeing these questions on the side, so I've been trying to think this entire time. And yeah, I mean, Ask Me Tomorrow is going to change, but one that comes to mind actually is Janet Mock, because I think people forget that she was actually a journalist, like when she started her career. And, one thing that she's always said, and I had the privilege of interviewing her from my podcast, and she said this many, many times before, that she always wanted to tell stories that mattered. And it's so simple, but it just really resonates with me, because not only did she, make that proclamation like really early in her career, but she's done it. I mean, in talking to her and interviewing her, I'm like, oh my God, like that's what I want to do. You went from journalist to being this, showrunner and TV writer, film writer, and she's, really targeting stories that are important to her. And I just kudos to her, because I mean, like she just really, she's out there doing it. So for me, it's like, I think people forget that she was actually a journalist, and I'm like, those are some good footsteps to follow. So Janet Mock for me.
Anybody else?
I love Tamika Mallory. I think she is a fiery activist, and she says it like, I mean, when we talk about code switch, and she don't code switch, she just tell it like it is. And I love that about her. And she reminds me a lot of my students. So yeah, I like Tamika Mallory.
Yeah, we can jump to the next one if we want. What else we got? How do you take care of yourself or do healing work for yourself while navigating white spaces? How are you making time for joy?
Logging off.
Yeah,
that's one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's truly, especially, it just being able to like step away and I don't even have to be doing anything specific. I mean, there's plenty of things that I love to do, but for me, it really is like just because the news cycle, especially this year, has been out of control. So just being able to like remove myself from that for 2 seconds, and it's difficult because I have to be on social media for my job a lot. But yeah, that's how I found my healing, and just logging off and not looking at my timeline, because it's abysmal. So
yeah. I guess how that would maybe manifest for me is taking the time to invest in yourself by creating your own work when you're not necessarily satisfied with, the environment that you're in. So like, I write music, plays, movies, TV shows every now and again. I don't know if things will happen with them, but like it fulfills me to just be able to create on my own terms, and not on anyone else's terms.
Yeah, that's really good, Jakeem, because I think we talk a lot about Black business owners getting out there and creating their own thing, and getting out of feeling like you're just making the white man money and filling out the white man's dream. Like you can do your own thing. That literally, I saw a clip on Instagram the other day where this Black woman pulls up into the drive-thru at McDonald's and goes, "How much you make an hour?" And the woman goes, $8. And she goes, "You want to make 12?" And the woman goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Walk out right now. Walk out right now. Get 2 of your friends, walk out." And she literally took these 3 women and they followed her down to her own restaurant. It's like, it's kind of guerrilla tactics here, but
Hey, that's way over capitalism.
and she's bringing up her Black sisters along the way too to come with her.
Yeah.
So that really reminded me of that. So
Absolutely.
Anybody else have a thought on this one?
I would just say, basically, I don't know, if it's talking about doing this kind of healing work while I'm still navigating this, not necessarily from my time away from it, but when I'm in these sort of spaces, you kind of have to, or at least for me, I'm trying to find out ways that even though I have to deal with all of this, what can I pave in the midst of this that's going to really work well for me? And I actually, interestingly enough, had a conversation earlier with my advisor where I was telling her, like, I'm just filling you in on these things that I'm doing on the side that you probably wouldn't know that I'm doing otherwise. But, and just saying, like, you know, with being more involved in diversity and inclusion within my scientific societies, I just, me and two other people within a specific academic society that we're in finally are able to launch a space for Black biomechanists to come together at our annual conference to be able to have a space where we can talk and we can have such discussions and have that support from one another. I remember when I was in grad school, the only other person I had is my current best friend, who's actually one of the other people who started this group with me. We had each other and we hung on to each other really tightly throughout that whole experience. So for me, we kind of want to be able to create that same kind of environment that we can have as we move forward in our professional life. And so me focusing on maybe some of those things that while I'm building my career can kind of go side by side with that allows me to have that space where I can have a little bit of reprieve while I'm within that white space. So
yeah, cool. I think we got time for a few more, but before the next one, if Laura can pop up that link for me again, I did just want to mention, it looks like we're doing really well. Thank you so much for everybody who's donated so far. We're at, it seems to be, we are at $1,900, just amazing. So we can get to that 2,000 mark. It would be so awesome to donate $1,000 to Beam, the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. So thank you for all those who are donating and like help us get to that 2,000. That would be awesome. Link is there, donorbox.org/you speak up. Thank you so much, Laura. You can jump to the next question for us. I am an alum of a college very similar to Muhlenberg. How can we put pressure on our institutions to do the anti-racist work, hire more diverse teaching staff, change the curriculum, etc.?
I'm looking at the students because you guys were activists back in your day. So what do you guys think?
Well, I guess our first instinct was to disrupt as much as possible just the normal goings on of the school. So like that manifested, I think, in a lot of like marches and some sit-ins and stuff like that. And some very strongly worded letters as well. What about you, Kelly?
Why are you asking me? I'm the moderator.
You're also a student. You did some of this stuff too. Come on.
Yeah. I don't know. It was hard for me. I remember I can speak to one particular instance, which we didn't think it would work then, but I probably think it would be effective now. Is Barry, who was my co-president during Black Student Association my senior year. Barry was like, we always are the ones responsible for doing Martin Luther King Day celebration or the Black History celebration. You know what? This year, let's not do anything. Let's not do anything. Let's not plan anything. Let's not promote anything, and then see what happens. And I was like, but why would we do that? You know what's going to happen. Nobody's going to do anything, and it's just gonna be dead. People aren't even gonna know that February is Black History Month.
It did
Martin Luther, but I said no. Let's not do it. But then had we done it and then pointed out the fact that his main point of why we should have done it and just had that conversation, I think that would have been really sobering, and that probably would have been groundbreaking. So Robin, keep that in mind, because that's something I was just too scared to do it, but he was really onto something there. So things like that, like those tactics where you're not afraid to just because I was afraid of, how I would look to professors and, my white friends who I hung out with as well. Like I was just afraid, and always constantly having to explain to them what I was doing and why I was doing it. It was tiring. So, just don't be afraid to do things like that.
Yeah. Be afraid to hold people accountable who need to be held
Yeah,
accountable.
exactly. All right, let's do two more. Let's do one more question. Two more questions. Let's pull up the next one. Right. With many different crises occurring at once, it can become easy to get discouraged. Are there any signs of hope that are keeping you going right now? Hope is important.
Yeah.
Hope is
It's a
important.
very important thing to have.
For me, it's always the young people.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw this young boy on and I hit this silly TikTok or whatever, I don't know, whatever it is. He caught a fish the other day. And he was like, oh my God, I just caught me my 7-pound fish. And I just said to myself, I'm doing this for him. I'm doing this for him. Whatever protest, whatever social movement I'm in, that's my hope. That, someday our children, you guys will have a better world. Hopefully I will too. But for me, that gives me a lot of satisfaction to see some young kid just enjoying their life. And yeah, I'm hopeful. I know I'll never give that up. I won't allow somebody to take that away from me. You guys, whenever I saw like Jakeem and Kelly, as much as they drove me absolutely insane as students, oh God.
Roasted.
But that energy and that passion and their belief in justice, they believed in it, and that was good. That was good. So yeah, that gives me lots of hope.
Nice. Wow, love that. I think, kind of on the same vein of that. When you think about, there's so many, studies and things that I've dove into, but just, the youth, but like Gen Z specifically, the people like this younger generation that's coming up, and they are so quick to call out the BS, and they're so quick to just speak out on so many things that I didn't see when I was their age. You're aware, but we didn't have those, easy tools to hop on social media and say and so it's for me, it's like, and it gives me hope, but it's also really depressing that these kids are in that position where they have to know that the adults are failing them, and they're like, okay, well, I'm gonna, take this into my own hands. But yeah, I think for me, it's like whenever I see, these kids using, their platforms, or however small they may be, and, making the TikToks, making Snapchats, like doing the work, going out and marching. It's crazy, and I love it. And I think for me, it's like, okay, maybe someday this will get a little bit better. But yeah, so yeah, the youth as well. But and that, in that vein of, Gen Z is here to save the world.
Yeah. And shall we go to our final question? Just jump to that. This will be our last question, final question. What are the ways that we can sustain and build upon the momentum surrounding dismantling systemic racism to continue to raise public consciousness?
I think it's, for me, I think about this in the way of using whatever, because I think it's easy for people to start to, as important it is to, post on social media and do all these things, I think some people can kind of find ways to tune it out. And for me, I always get so excited when I see people discussing it, attacking the issue from all different angles, like whether it is, doing a movie, writing scripts, making music, arts, science, whatever your specialty is. I love when people find their own way to talk about these issues. And, for me, it's like, I think we're so used to kind of like the normal channels of getting the message out there. And so for me, I think it's really key to look at your skill set, look at whatever it is that you do, and find ways to channel that through that, you know, because I think for me, that's like kind of the way that I would love to see this momentum continue. So find those ways that we haven't really tackled it before. And yeah, so that's kind of it for me, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You can go ahead.
No.
Migo?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think another one of the important things, aside from that, I mean, you know, we're a very technological age right now, and everything is about posting on, you know, social media and all the other stuff, and all that is fantastic, and that definitely raises awareness. But I think people have to remember that you still got to do the work at home. So being able to continue that conversation, some of those things, those conversations, those actions, that education, that unlearning, a lot of that stuff has to take place off of social media. So you can raise awareness about it, but make sure you're doing the work at home. And, you know, specifically for our majority folks, have those tough conversations that the rest of us cannot have with certain people. And unfortunately, that might be with some friends or with some family members or things like that. And you know, there are multiple times, whether you're a majority person, minority person, where you've been in a situation and you knew that something racist was said or racist was done, but you chose not to speak up. And I remember I posted this on my Facebook a while back, but I was like, take the time to think about why you chose not to speak up in that situation and what you can do future forward the next time you're in that position to speak up and say something. So I think a lot of the way to continue this is that you got to do the work at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Robin, go ahead. You were.
No, I think I have nothing else to add. Both what Casey and Erica said is exactly what I agree.
Yeah. Jakeem, anything else?
Yeah, no, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but yeah, continuing the doing the good work at home. I'm interested kind of in what comes after consciousness raising, as in, like, you know, now that you're presented with this information about this is the state of the world, this is what we go through, like, what do you do with that information going forward? So I've yet to see how that, you know, because, like, this is a cycle. This is nothing new. Like, the moment that we're in now, we've seen before, and we'll probably see again, you know, in our lifetime. So I'm trying to see, like, what's coming after that, because a lot of people are getting tired of the cyclical nature of this. Like, you know, history is always, you know, echoing, you know. So I'm just curious what comes next. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
Nobody does. And
yeah.
That's the point. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys. I know applaud all of you. Thank you for donating your time to this and just being so open and honest, and really not pulling your punches. So thank you. From here, we're just going to jump to our artistic director, Laura, who has some words for us, and then we'll take it on out.
Sweet.
Hello, folks. Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. Can we also take a moment of plaudits for that panel and the Q&A section? It's been a joy to watch. I am the co-founder and artistic director of Views. I'm excited to give some closing remarks. So thank you for doing that with me right now, or giving me the space. I want to start off with saying our anti-racism work flourishes when we function in our communities, right? In our workspaces, in our homes, apartment buildings, neighborhoods, houses of worship. And for my fellow white folks, we need to, when we're stepping into our communities and really participating as a community member, we need to remember, decenter ourselves, check our egos at the door. We need to strive to learn, to be accountable for the mistakes that we will make, and grow, and embody, as Mariame Kaba says, a consistent discipline of hope so that we don't leave the fight. The fact is, the fight for abolition and for Black liberation has lasted centuries. It's carried on the shoulders of Black women like Angela Davis, Mariame Kaba, Ruth Wilson Gilmore. We must follow their lead, and being fortified by the interdependence of our communities, we can continue to dismantle racist systems and do new world building, right? The artistry and creativity that Use espouses, that we see in our artist community and in all the communities of these folks that spoke tonight, that artistry and creativity can be part of this fight, constantly informing and growing our activism process. And I think, you know, actually, that's where my thoughts end. And I wanted to just give a little reiteration that, as we know, half of the proceeds tonight will be donated to Beam. I'm gonna bring up our donation link once more. Beam is the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. They're dedicated to healing, to wellness, and justice for Black and marginalized communities. And the other half of funds that come from tonight's event will go towards Use as we provide programming for artists as we navigate COVID and seeing what that looks like in our future, and particularly giving space and support to underrepresented artist communities within that collective. So you still have some time to donate. The link is here on the screen. It's also on the comment thread on the Facebook Live video, and it's in the description box of the YouTube Live video. That being said, we are so thankful for all your donations. We are thankful that, most importantly, you're joining us tonight for the conversation that needs to be had. And we just, you know, hand the torch to you to continue it onward. Thank you to our incredible panelists, our Use team, our board members, our planning committee, who all made this possible. And yeah, we'll see you very soon. We're going to bring everybody on back for just a little farewell wave, a little pageantry wave. Here we go. We're bringing Robin, we're bringing Kelly, Erica.
Hold on. And one thing, let me say one thing. I'm getting some messages that the donor box is crashing. So if you can't get through donor box,
Hey,
I got options. You can go to Venmo.
Oh, right.
Look at her. She's ready.
Hey.
We have the
Done.
technology.
Done.
Laura supporting us from the back end. Beautiful. So Venmo is also at Underground Skills X. If you can donate there, you can also donate there. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Very
nice meeting everybody.
Lovely to
see
meet
from the
you. Yeah.
from the notification so far. And thank you all of you guys once again.
Thank you,
everybody.
Kelly.
Bye.
And
See you
Laura.
very soon. Woohoo. Kel, I'll see ya.